with our last session, and I'm very excited to have with me Neil Bradley from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who's our Chief Policy Officer, our Executive Vice President. He's our go-to guy for everything in Washington. And Neil, we just appreciate the partnership that the Georgia Chamber has, all of our local chambers, with you and Suzanne and the leadership at the U.S. Chamber. Thank you for what you guys do every day, and thanks for taking a few minutes to be with us this morning.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's an honor for me to be with you. Back at you in terms of the partnership. The insights that you and your team give us as we're trying to think about federal policy, frankly, the lessons that we're learning from you all as you all navigate difficult issues. I couldn't be more grateful for the partnership that we have. And I think it inures to the benefit of your members and frankly, from our perspective, to the whole nation.
Well, and we talk a lot about the chamber family, right? I don't care if you remember the local chamber, the state chamber, your regional chambers, the national chamber, just be a member and be involved. And of course, what you guys do for us and the partnership on the policy issues is so vitally important. And I'm going to give an update today on where we are here 5 months into the new administration, a very different Congress, very different Senate than we've dealt with before. But Neil, start off and just tell us from your perspective, your unique perspective, what has this new Congress accomplished here that's important to business over these last 4 or 5 months? Because we see all the infighting, we see the polarization from here. I'm curious, are we seeing progress or other issues being addressed from your perspective?
Well, I'll be completely honest with you. I think the jury is out on a lot of things. Like any new Congress, particularly beginning with a new administration, the gears of government start slowly turning in Washington, D.C. They have huge opportunities ahead of them, particularly in the areas of infrastructure, American competitiveness, particularly vis-a-vis China. And I got to tell you, I want to come back to that because that's actually, I think, the most underreported area where I think we're going to see real progress, and it's going to inure to our benefit, and almost no one's paying attention to it. But then also real opportunities when it comes to workforce issues and dealing with what we hope is going to be a red hot recovery and making sure that businesses have the workers and that people have the skills to meet those worker demands to really help our economy grow. Obviously, the big ticket item that they got done was that big pandemic relief bill.
Right.
Some good things in it. Restaurant Revitalization Fund. $28 billion that's really helping our restaurants and bars that struggled during the pandemic, extension of the Paycheck Protection Program, employee retention tax credits. So there's 3 good things for business, but obviously some not so good things. A lot of spending that's going to contribute to inflation, extended unemployment benefits well beyond where they should be. And so it was a mixed bag in all honesty.
So I want to go back I want to come back to these issues, particularly infrastructure in China, but I want to ask you one kind of off question. One of the things we saw in the last administration, the U.S. Chamber really led on this, was the reduction of regulations on businesses, which I think was the most underreported story of the last 4 or 5 years. Have you seen the new administration start to really focus on ramping up regulations on business, or is it still too early to see that impact yet?
Well, first, you're exactly right. The deregulatory impacts, over $100 billion in just the last quarter in savings to the private economy because of regulatory costs that the prior administration reduced. The Biden administration, in its first 100 days, has issued 40-some executive orders that in total reverse 67 prior executive actions from the Trump administration. To put that in context, the prior record of an administration reversing a prior administration's work was actually the Trump administration reversing Obama policies. And what Biden's done is 5 times the level of what President Trump did in reversing Obama policies. Now, when he reversed those normally start a process where the agencies then begin going in and rewriting regulations. And we're just in the beginning stages of those agency rewriting the reg process. But whether it's energy regulations out of the EPA, a lot of labor regulations out of the Department of Labor, we're really concerned that in the second half of this year, we're going to see new proposals, new regulatory programs that impose a huge cost on employers.
Well, and I think you'll agree with this to any of our members that are listening today. If your industry or association's impacted by these types of regulations, let us know so we can let Neil know and we can be part of this discussion, because it's going to be the next 6 months, but then the next couple of years, we're going to be dealing with this.
No question. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's go and switch gears and talk about China for a minute, because we held our board meeting just a few weeks ago, and I gave a whole presentation on risk to businesses in Georgia and spent half of my time talking about, the 5 Chinese plans, right? The Chinese government plans right now to really dominate the economy. And so tell me from your perspective where the opportunities are for us to counterbalance and to maybe have something done in a bipartisan way to deal with the China threat.
Yeah, the real opportunity, and we talked to China experts who, really confirm this. The thing that the Chinese don't understand about the US and the thing that they desperately want to emulate is the dynamism, right? So the innovation that goes on, the ability to start new businesses from scratch because someone has a good idea and create a technology that changes the world. They're never going to get that freedom aspect by, around what we have. But what they are doing is investing heavy amounts into R&D centers, into university programs, and frankly, into intellectual property theft, that if you can't build it, you try to steal it or buy it in some fashions to try to take away the U.S. advantage. Now, what we think needs to be done, and what, frankly, legislation that's currently moving through the U.S. Senate called the Endless Frontiers Act attempts to do, is to treat this moment the exact same way that we treated competition from the Soviet Union in the 1950s. Maybe some people will remember, but probably learned it in a history book we were listening today. The Soviets put Sputnik into space, and the U.S. turned around and said, you know what? If we're going to compete, we got to invest in science, early initial R&D. We got to support university centers. You got a lot of great universities in Georgia that are research universities. And frankly, we've let that investment stagnate. So the proposal in the Senate's $100 billion investment in U.S. R&D and U.S. research capabilities through American universities. Those are the kind of steps that will make sure that the Chinese can't erode what is a natural U.S. advantage. And so it's actually led by a Republican, Senator Young from Indiana, and a Democrat, Senator Schumer, who's the Democratic leader. But I suspect by the time that this is done, this is going to be one of those bills that's 90-something to 2. I don't know who the 2 are, but 90-something to 2, because it's so imperative for the U.S.
It is imperative. And one of the things that I know you fought for hard was the transatlantic partnership. 4 years ago, we didn't join that. What are the movements on some of the trade deals right now to try to balance out what China's doing, particularly in the South China Sea, in that area?
Yeah, we're not seeing the movement we want to see on the trade front, but we are seeing some multilateral engagement. So if you think about what the Trump administration really got right with respect to China, it was finally confronting China, right? So presidents of both parties had just kind of danced around the edges and refused to take it on. President Trump took it on. He deserves credit for that. The piece that from our perspective was a little bit missing was that we got lots of allies around the world who China's trying to do the same thing to them. And, there are strength in our allies and our ability to confront Chinese aggression in the South China Sea, to confront unfair trade practices, to set the rules of the road on global trade. And that's what the new administration is working towards. The element of that they really need to follow through on, though, is on that trade front. It's a problem that the rest of the Pacific Rim nations are part of a trading bloc and the U.S. is excluded. It's a problem that the Chinese are competing with that by forming their own trading bloc that, of course, the U.S. is excluded from. And so if we want to do this well, and by the way, support U.S. agriculture, U.S. manufacturing, who can sell into these countries, the key is to get in that trans-Pacific trading bloc.
Right. So that's a good, I think, segue into the infrastructure discussion, because China has made it a priority to invest in the Silk and Road Initiative. You know, I think it's what, $3 to $7 trillion spent building out ports, roads. But yet in America, we've been having this conversation for years and years that we've really fallen behind. Now, you guys led the effort called Bill by the 4th. We signed on. We want to see this bill passed. The infrastructure bill, though, that we got out of the administration was much broader than any of us ever expected. So tell us kind of where we are today. I know that the Republicans have put forward their own version of it. Where's the U.S. Chamber, and where do we go on this?
Yeah, so the administration's proposal, once you kind of slice up the $2.3 trillion, which I almost stumble over saying because it's such a large number, but when you break it apart, there are really kind of three components. The first component is what I think almost all of us would call traditional infrastructure, roads and bridges and transit, and now broadband, and ports, like the Port of Savannah, and waterways, and water and wastewater systems. Then a portion of it is kind of new infrastructure, their push on electric vehicles. Another portion is what they call the competitiveness agenda. It actually includes that 100 billion we just talked about on the endless frontiers for competition with China. And then there's this kind of fourth part that really has nothing to do with anything anyone would call infrastructure. And it turns out it's like one of the single largest line items in the bill, $400 billion for home care for senior citizens, which, leaving aside whether it's a good idea or not, it's not infrastructure. When we think about how this is going to progress, the two buckets that are the most important is that competitiveness bucket, and that's kind of on its own track already in Congress, and that's a good thing, and we should keep that moving. And then there's the traditional infrastructure bucket. Now, when you add up all those elements in the traditional infrastructure bucket, and people quibble on what's in, what's out, but in general, it's about $800 billion in traditional infrastructure. Well, lo and behold, $800 billion happens to be about the number that Leader McConnell is talking about where Republicans could end up for an infrastructure bill. So when we look at that, we say, okay, when we're talking infrastructure, let's focus on that component. We think the number is about right in that range. And then let's talk about the other two critical elements, making sure that we get the permitting reform done so that when we actually cut the check, we can actually build a project. And then we have to talk about how to finance it. And there, we're diametrically opposed to the way the administration has proposed funding it. They basically want to tax the U.S. business community in a way that's not just punitive, that would actually make us less competitive in this global environment. We pre-2017 had the distinction of the most uncompetitive business tax code in the industrialized world. We were actually first, if you like to be first, in terms of our tax rate on business. And we were one of the only ones who taxed U.S. businesses, including big companies there in Georgia, on their worldwide operations. 2017 tax bill virtually fixed that, put us in the middle of the pack in terms of business tax rates, and frankly, the middle of the pack in terms of competitiveness. And this would undo all of that and put us right back to having the most uncompetitive tax code, only country taxing on a worldwide basis. And all that does is give people an incentive to locate their corporate headquarters, their manufacturing, and everything else in a country other than America. So we're opposed to that. We think there are other ways to pay for it. We're actually hopeful that we're winning this argument both with Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill.
So looking at the crystal ball for a minute, is there any likelihood that any of these get passed by the 4th of July, or are we looking at the fall when they come back? What kind of time frame are you hearing?
So I don't think it'll be on the president's desk by the 4th of July, but I think we'll have a bill moving through the House and the Senate by the 4th of July. And whether or not they finish up those negotiations in July before the August break or right after, if you make me pick one, I bet they do it before the August break. There's actually a pretty long history dating back to Ronald Reagan's first year in office, where one or two big things get done the summer of a president's first year in office. And I think this is one of those big things. And I think the pressure will be on to get it done before Labor Day.
So Neil, then let's say that gets done on hopefully on your time frame. What's the next major issue that you're seeing coming down the pipeline for Congress to deal with?
Well, the issue that we hope that they deal with really is on the workforce side.
Okay.
And so, I think we're going to have a big debate about whether the next big package should be workforce related, or whether it should be what the president has unveiled as the American Families Plan, which is free community college, universal pre-K, a lot of kind of wealth transfer. I mean, it's $800 billion and literally in direct wealth transfers in the tax code. That risk, one, is just bad policy. It undermines economic growth. It's also going to be inflationary. What we're talking to the administration about is, and to Capitol Hill, is let's focus on the challenges that we have. If you recall back to pre-pandemic, the biggest problem that employers had was finding workers to fill open jobs and the skills mismatch. That's quickly becoming the number one issue today. We can actually lift a lot of people's incomes and lift a lot of families out of poverty if we help people get the skills to connect to the jobs that we have, and we can keep businesses operating because they can fill open positions. So we think that is job training skills, that is removing barriers for returning to work, and ultimately that's going to include something on immigration.
Well, and we've had a global talent initiative here for several years, and so we're all in on dealing with that. Also on childcare, I know we're watching Senator Romney's bill, Senator Hawley's bill, other efforts up there to try to find a way to deal with this. I mean, quite frankly, in Georgia, we've lost too many women out of the workforce over the last year, and childcare continues to be what we see is that one issue hanging out there. So I know that's a priority for you guys too, and we look forward to working with you on it. Neil, thank you for your time today. Thank you for the whole team at the U.S. Chamber and what you guys do, the partnership that we have, and please know you can call on us at any time, and we'll be here to stand with you. We appreciate you.
Well, likewise. Thanks for having me, Chris. Congratulations on a great virtual fly-in. I am really looking forward to not very distant future where we're welcoming everyone in person to the nation's capital.
Yeah, we hope to have this group there
shoulder to shoulder.